I talked to a brother today while I was out this morning who observed the video, and he had told me that his wife was enjoying it, but she felt like I should have spoken a little bit more in depth on how um, men have caused the community to be as it is this day. Because he was telling me that she was saying that it seems like he has a grudge against the previous generation, more so on the women's side. So I'm going to address that. Now, when I was talking about this, that was based upon when I went to church with my ex, and um, they focused on the mother's board, and they focused on honoring the mother's board. And as I said before, these women were coming in with their chests, all poked up, and they was dressed in white, which is supposed to symbolize innocence and flawlessness. And so by my coming up where I was, seeing the things that I saw, being able to identify these women according to their age with that particular generation, I did not stand for them. Had there been fathers being honored, I would not have stood for them either. But I think what she was telling my friend was valid. So I'm going to go into that for a few minutes. It's easy to assume that that video is against women when it's really not. It's really not. The women of that generation, no, it's not. Because the fathers were just as guilty as the women, because the fathers were dancing down that Soul Train line as well. And what I had came to find out, because there used to be another Soul Train outside of Don Cornelius that used to be in Chicago, and it was upon the channel 22, channel 22. And my oldest sister, Bibi, she used to be on that Soul Train all the time. And so, but this Soul Train wasn't hosted by Brother Don Cornelius, rest in peace. I forget the brother's name, but it was hosted by someone else. However, he was able to obtain the right to call his show as well Soul Train. And this, like I said, this was in Chicago, Illinois. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because by my sister dancing with these people, I knew a lot of the people who were dancing on that particular Soul Train in Chicago. And I would hear conversations because I was a curious dude, little dude. And what I noticed is that the men who were attending that Soul Train, as well as Don Cornelius' Soul Train, those women who they were dancing down the Soul Train line were not their wives. Now, a lot of people may say, well, maybe they was too young to be married. Well, back in the 70s, most couples, despite how young they were married. My mother had got married to my father at the age of 15. Now, I'm not basing everyone else's ages of getting married based upon when my father married my mother, who was but 15 years old, as I said. But what I did find out is that these men were either separated. I mean, there was a lot of separation in that generation. So these men were still married, but they were on Soul Train with their girlfriends that dancing down Soul Train. And so back in those days, as I said, there was a lot of separations going on. There were the percentage of divorces was very low back in those days. These men just left their homes, and still neither one of them, whether male or female, ever sat down and discussed divorce, totally ending it. There were times of when, and I'm pretty sure some of you heard of this, when men would have his primary family at one end of the block, and he would have another family either down the block or 2 blocks over, and these women knew about it. They both knew each other. And so this guy would go from his primary home to his girlfriend's home. He had children by both of these women. There was even one time I heard one of my auntie's friends, when I was over there with my auntie talking, while she was over there talking to one of her friends, and she told one of her young sons, who was but between 8 and 9 years old, and she said, go down there to Miss Lawrence's house and tell your daddy to come home because dinner is almost done. And so when me and my aunt was walking back to her car, I asked my aunt, I'm like, what's she talking about? My aunt had explained to me she was talking about her husband's girlfriend. And I'm like, her husband's girlfriend? And she knows about it? Now, one of the reasons why I questioned that at the age of 11 years old is because that was in opposition of what was going on where I was living in my great-grandmother's home. That type of stuff just wasn't gonna happen. And so I found that odd. And then I asked my wife, so I asked my auntie, so they both know about it? And she said, yeah. And I was like, wow. And my auntie, she said, you know that Temptation song? Papa was a Rolling Stone, and wherever he laid his hat was his home. She said, you have a lot of men out here like that in this society. We're talking about that present generation that the mother's board belonged to. You had plenty Rolling Stones, many of them. I used to see a lot of men destroy their families because they got caught up in this whole effect from seeing these characters up in the blaxploitation. You know, they wanted to be slick, with their little rims on, they long fur coats, and my mother used to call them Mr. Papa Doo-Wah type dudes. I used to hear them, even younger versions of them, stand on the corner and sit up, throw their dice and everything, play craps on the corner, talk about who they slept with the other night. Ain't nobody got no pussy at all. We're just standing there on the corner, just lying to each other, competing with one another, trying to impress one another. Well, I did this and I did that, and me, I'll kill a nigga, man. I'll kill a nigga. I used to sit around. I used to stand a little bit further off from these guys and just listen. I would just listen to their conversations. I would go to Ray's barbershop and sit in the barbershop. They used to call me, Ray used to call me Little Kelly because I was part of the Kelly family through my grandfather. He used to call me Little Kelly. So I used to sit in there and I used to listen to these men talk all the time. And whenever the conversation started dying down a little bit, sometimes whenever Ray wouldn't have any more customers, whether I needed a haircut or not, he would say, "Get up here in this chair, Little Kelly." He was calling me Little Kelly. And I would tell him, "I don't need a haircut." He said, "Get up here in this chair." He said, "Let me clean you up a little bit." So he would clean me up, line me up real good. But during all of those conversations, I used to listen to a lot of immoral conversations that came from the men. So it's a generation that compromised on both sides. That's my point. It wasn't just the women who compromised. It was the men who compromised as well. But the generation before them were the marriages of my great-grandfather, in which lasted for 30 to 40 years. That was I would say, the last productive era when it came to marriages. And I would say, let's say like from the early 1900s going into the 1920s. And that era lasted until the early 1960s, and then that's when the marriages began to fail. And then we go into the 70s, like I explained some other videos. It's when the drugs came in and the infidelity started increasing, and all of those things transpired, in which gave birth to the hip hop generation, in which gave all of these young people something to talk about based upon what they saw and felt in their environment. So it wasn't just the mother's board. The mothers, as I said before, that was simply an occasion of my being in a church with an ex, and they brought up the mother's board. And as a matter of fact, I recall when I was looking at my previous video, it wasn't, the church's title wasn't Mountain View, it was called Mountain Top. And so I wanted to point that out, that a whole lot of our the grandfathers of this generation, they didn't help at all. They didn't help. And then you have the mothers lying to the children about who is their father. I mean, look at what Tupac's mother just did, how she lied about Tupac's father being deceased. Look at what Brother Kirk Franklin just had to endure. I would encourage pretty much everybody to observe that video, that documentary of Kirk Franklin, because these mothers hold a whole lot of animosity towards men. And I would have to include myself, because I'm somewhat going through that right now. having my son's mother consistently around my sons, lying to them every day of their lives. I have to know that that's going on with me, and there's nothing that I can do about it. Nothing. The same as I said in my previous video on how my uncles were maintained in that home going into their 30s. And they're not. Everyone after my great grandmother passed away struggled to learn things on their own after her death. Here it is, I have a son 31 and a son 34. And she has pretty much held them in hostage. So here it is again. I saw my uncles go through that. Now I have to stand there and watch this woman sabotage their lives. Now I'm 60 going on, I'm going on 60 this month. And in January the 20th. Hold on. I think I need some more coffee. So say if something happened to me and I'm gone. Say if something happened to both of us and we're gone. Right now, neither one of my sons are prepared for life. So there's the family curse. Right over again, being passed down from generation to generation. As I said, of the other youth, it is their environment. It is the effects of the environment that has affected these kids today. So that's what it is. So I'm bringing all of this up because a lot of men did help destroy the community and create the hip hop community, because a lot of these rappers, if you take time to talk to them one-on-one, they would tell you that their father wasn't around. And then what they knew about their father is equivalent to what the Temptations talked about him being a Rolling Stone, having a whole bunch of women. The only rapper that I recall, it could be more, but the only rappers that I recall saying anything about his father is brother Tupac Shakur, rest in peace. That's the only one that I recall, me personally. He's the only one. So yes, the men messed up too. And you had better believe at that time, I knew that they messed up. It just wasn't their moment. And you better believe, if they wanted to honor the fathers, I still would have sat my ass down in that seat and I wouldn't have stood up, because I know better. So we have to become better men. And we have to stop ripping out the hearts of our women. And our women are going to have to stop ripping out the hearts of our men. But this one is focusing on us as brothers. We got to stop hurting these women, making them angry and bitter and rigid. Because of that, this is what we're dealing with today. This is what we're dealing with today. So we have to clean it up. We have to heal our community. We have to talk to one another. We have to go in and talk to the so-called elders so that we can learn about the mistakes that they're made, so we will know what to discard inside of ourselves. We have to discard it. But one of the major problems it is, and I hear Brother Angry Man talk about it a lot. I hear Brother Anton Daniels, and I hear Brother Sister Crimson Cure talk about it all the time. No one wants to take accountability for their actions. And until you guys take accountability for your actions and just talk to these young men, admit your flaws, tell them where you messed up. Because redemption is a beautiful thing. And when you pass that information over to these young men and you admit your flaws, you're helping these young men shape and mold themselves into better men than you were. See, the whole thing is to make our youth better than we were. Because if they're better than we were, then the standards of morality increase. They increase. And things get better by way of growth and increase. Redemption. Taking accountability for what we did and what we didn't do. That's how we grow.